Greetings and welcome to channel Mr. Wolf Recaps. Today we will watch the science fiction thriller called 222. The film opens as a man walks through Grand Central Station in New York with a gun in his hand. People around him notice the gun and start running away. He walks over to another man who seems to be protecting the girl. Both men point their guns at each other when security stops them. The camera pans to the clock, which shows that the time is exactly 2:22. Then we can hear gunshots. Turns out it was just a dream. A man named Dylan wakes up from his slumber and moves forward with his routine. Listening to the news. The news is about a star named Hamlin that died 30 years ago, but its light reaches Earth 30 years later, and in a supernova, it will affect Earth and its inhabitants. Dylan is then shown on his way to work, cycling and walking to Grand Central Station to take the train. He works as an air traffic controller with serious talent and pattern visualization. After work, he goes to a club to drink with his colleagues and receives a ticket to the aerial ballet as a present for his upcoming birthday. The next day at work, he begins to see patterns of constellations in front of him. He begins to hallucinate about his constant sleep and cannot communicate with the planes. He looks at the clock to see that it is exactly 10 p.m. Looking closely, he realizes that the clock has stopped. Dylan comes to his senses only when his colleagues call him. Dylan notices that the planes are about to crash into each other because of his pause. He quickly reports to the pilots and saves them from falling by a centimeter. Passengers on planes were relieved. Dylan notices that the clock has started working again. Because of this incident, he was suspended for 4 weeks. The day after he was suspended, he attends an aerial ballet, where he sees a woman named Sarah and is struck by her beauty. After the ballet is over, everyone is at the after party. Dylan approaches Sarah and introduces himself. They go to a restaurant and start talking. Dylan told Sarah that his father was a pilot and that he was also training to be a pilot, but that he could never become one because he was afraid of flying. Sarah tells him that she works at the Howard Pace Art Gallery. He also tells her that he is suspended from work, and learns that Sarah was on the plane that almost collided with another aircraft at 1422. Dylan apologized for the incident, but Sarah instead thanked Dylan for saving her life. As they leave, they admit to each other that on the first day they felt a deep connection and it felt like they had known each other forever. The next day, while on his way to Grand Central, Dylan notices the same happenings as the day before. The siren, the woman is laughing. Construction sends a man who says, "Can I help you?" and the glass breaks him. As he arrives at Grand Central Station at 2:21 p.m. he sees a businessman reading his newspaper, a couple hugging in a line of preschoolers where the last child in line drops something, and a pregnant woman under the clock at exactly 2:22 p.m. The station window shatters. He then goes to meet Sarah and invites her to an early dinner. He goes with her to Central Park for ice cream. Sarah reveals that she stopped dancing because of an injury. Dylan feels bad. "So let me cheer her up." He plays a song and starts dancing in front of her. She joins him in a happy dance together in the middle of a busy park. In the end, they kiss, go to Dylan's apartment and make love. The next morning they lie on the bed and cuddle. Dylan asks Sarah where she got the necklace, to which Sarah replied that it was from her ex-boyfriend Jonas, who happens to be the head artist of the gallery where she works. Dylan asks when Sarah's birthday is and they learn that they were both born on the same day, April 18, 1986. And they will both turn 30 in a week. Dylan suddenly hears a car accident on the road below his apartment at exactly 9:15 and tells Sarah that the same incident has happened for the third day in a row. Dylan then takes a taxi to Grand Central. As the driver takes a shorter route, Dylan tells him to stop the taxi and again notices the same pattern of sirens, the construction sounds of a woman laughing and a man saying, "Can I help you?" Dylan then fires for the taxi to stop, infuriating the taxi driver, who turns to tell Dylan off for yelling at him. Just then another car hit them and broke the glass windows of the cabin. Although Dylan is injured, he goes to Grand Central Station and sees the exact same pattern of events. A businessman stands with a newspaper and an elderly couple hugs. A group of children are walking in line when the last child drops something. And finally, there is a pregnant woman standing under the clock. He talks about repeating Sarah V's patterns, but with different people performing the same actions. Sarah doesn't trust Dylan, but she helps him clean the wounds from the car accident. Dylan goes home and starts writing down all the events of his day starting at 9 and 10 a.m. First he writes about a drop of water, then about dying and a plane flying overhead. Dylan goes to the top of his apartment building to see if the pattern is repeating itself. He is waiting for a drop of water like yesterday, but the sky is clear. However, exactly at 9 and 10, again a drop falls on his notebook. Surprised, he closes the notebook, and when he opens it, there is a bug on the page. Then a plane flew over and the pattern repeated itself. Dylan can hardly believe it. Dylan goes to the gallery looking for Sarah and realizes that the gallery had an exhibit with Jonas artwork as the main exhibit. Jonas is Sarah's ex-boyfriend. He created a light hologram display of Grand Central Station, and Dylan sees that it is just like the events he experienced the past few days. A businessman reading his newspaper, a couple hugging, a row of preschoolers and pregnant women under the clocks. Dylan assumes that Jonas is after him, as only Dylan knows about these events. He attacks Jonas, resulting in a brawl. He questions Jonas if he said in the audience that he is the owner of the Kaffir Gallery. He applauded, saying it was a great idea to carry out a murder at Grand Central Station that happened 30 years ago. Sarah apologizes to Jonas for Dylan's attack and puts her relationship with Dylan on hold. Later that day, Dylan texted Sarah to beg for forgiveness. Meanwhile, she finds a bunch of envelopes hidden in his home. He learns that a man named Jake Redmond wrote these letters to a woman named Evelyn. After investigating, Dylan learns that Jake Redmond lived in his apartment 30 years ago, back in 1987. He also finds an article on the internet and learns about a murder that happened 30 years ago at Grand Central. Jake Redmond was the killer. He killed his lover Evelyn and a police officer in the middle of Grand Central. Evelyn was even pregnant at the time. The murder happened exactly that 22 killed Evelyn out of jealousy because Evelyn was in love with a police officer. No trace of who Jake killed that day as well. He also reveals that Jake, Evelyn, and Sarah share the same birthday. In fact, he and Sarah were born on the day Jake and Evelyn died. Dylan connects the dots and realizes that he and Sarah are Jake and Evelyn in another life. Then finds the Eastlands address in the letters and visits her home. Dylan meets Sister Evelyn, who tells him that Evelyn loves Jake very much. So she thinks Jake killed Evelyn because he likes other people's fakes. She also informs him that Noah, the police officer, was also in love with Evelyn. When Dylan returns home, he connects with the constellation that happens after 30 years in their situation. He sees that the 3 stars included in the constellation are actually Jake, Evelyn, and Noah, and currently they are Dylan, Sarah, and Jonas. With the constellation back, their fates have returned, and he texts Sarah about what he saw and asks her to meet him. Sarah is in the gallery looking at the Jonas holograms. She tells Jonas about Dylan's revelations, but Jonas dismisses it as Dylan's delusion. Later that day, Dylan is in his apartment when Sarah visits him. She sees him upset and tries to comfort him. Dylan tells her that since the next day is their birthday, there's a chance he could kill her, like Jake killed Evelyn. So he tells her to leave and never meet him again for their sake. After Sarah leaves, Dylan loses control and starts breaking things around his apartment. He then goes to the terrorists with the intention of jumping off the building, but changes his mind. Sarah, on the other hand, goes to Jonas' office and tells him everything that happened. Jonas offers to take her on vacation to take his attention off Dylan. The next morning, Dylan realizes that the water dropped the bug, the plane, and everything that happens in the pattern happened to Jake the day he died. The form tries to inform Dylan that Sarah is in danger. After realizing this, Dylan runs to save her. He calls her several times along the way, but she doesn't answer, so he goes to Jonas's office. There, he is shocked to see a wall filled with Sarah's pictures and several holograms of her. He realizes that Jonas is obsessed with Sarah. He also finds an empty gun case and, now certain Sarah is in danger, rushes to the station to find her. Meanwhile, Jonas and Sarah are at Grand Central Station buying tickets for their trip. Jonas tells Sarah to wait for him under the clock. History is repeating. Jonas returns to her with the cards, and he realizes that they are living their past. Sarah tells him that she can't go with him because she's in love with Dylan. Upset, he asks Sarah to tell him she loves him, but Sarah refuses just as Dylan arrives at the station. Jonas thinks that Sarah called him there. He gets mad and starts towards Dylan with a gun. Sarah begins to see the same characters that Dylan described. A businessman, a couple hugging children, and so on. She realizes that everything Dylan said is true, but that means a pregnant woman under the clock as well as Sarah herself. Jonas points the gun at Dylan first. And then he points to Sarah, who says that if he couldn't have her, Neither could Dylan, and he protects Sarah in time, but is shot at 14 and 21. The events of 30 years ago take place, and exactly at 14 and 22 Jonas is shot by the police who got sick there. Dylan falls into Sarah's arms and closes his eyes for a moment. He has visions of Jake and Evelyn being tender. Luckily, he doesn't die. Sarah then looked at her watch. Now they are 14 and 23. They managed to survive, and fate changed. We finally learn that in a past life for Officer Noah, he was the one who killed Evelyn and Jake, but the police twisted the story to save their reputations. The dying star Hamlin mentioned at the beginning of the film finally fades, but a new star is immediately reborn. In the final scene, Dylan and Sarah are shown living happily, with Dylan finally overcoming his fear of flying and now a pilot, and Sarah smiling gently at her baby in the cradle. I hope you enjoyed the brief review of the film, and be sure to watch IT Rewards.